things that are of practical interest to us actually exist in the real world, in the objective world, in the world that science describes. So, what's the right reaction there? Abject terror? Blank it out? And all that's going on is that we are projecting that stuff onto the world with our minds. It's not really there. We just project it onto the world. The color, the smell, the beauty of the flower that you care about, that's just projected by you. But then if you think of the mind as this kind of projection apparatus, then where does the mind itself fit in to the physical world? Surely physics is telling us about the whole world. I mean, could the mind be described scientifically? Does that make sense? And if the scientific method is to say, well, I can describe everything mathematically, and I can describe everything in terms of the behavior of fundamental atoms, then the trouble is the mind doesn't really seem to fit that pattern. It doesn't seem to be mathematically describable, and it doesn't seem to be made of atoms. So how can it fit in to the scientific picture at all? If we take the scientific picture fully seriously, then it seems like at the end of the day, we have to throw out the mind itself altogether. I mean, why think there is such a thing there? Physics is telling you all that there is in the world. There isn't any room in such a picture for the mind that isn't mathematically describable and it isn't made of atoms. On that bleak note, we end the first section. Uh-huh. An algorithm?
Yes, an algorithm that predicts what you make or your personal preferences.
Right. You could have that. You could have a mathematical algorithm that would describe me and what I'm going to choose, say. Yeah? Is that right?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, how does that fit into the mind that we describe in mathematics?
That's right. So, well, to take, for example, suppose I'm in a restaurant and they're offering me dim sum. I have lots of things to choose from. And there's an algorithm. You have the algorithm. You know, watch him. He's going to go for that one. Right? You don't know anything about the deeper meaning these things have for me. You don't understand how the taste of this particular dish brings back to me that autumn evening so long ago. Yeah? You get an algorithm, but you don't understand the first thing about what is going on in my mind when I reject that because it reminds me of Sally, and that always hurts. You see what I mean? Having an algorithm is not going to fill you in on what it's like from my point of view. Yeah? Sorry? I'm just missing a word. Can you say it again? Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a good predictive gadget, but it's not the same as knowing what's going on in here. Yep. So a way to... Anything else on that? A way to think of this is that we do take it, I mean, after all, we do take it in real life. Nobody is going to really throw out our ordinary thinking about one another's minds. But our ways of knowing about one another's minds seem to involve this kind of use of the imagination. It seems to involve getting to know someone, just involves getting some empathy for them, getting to know about them. And that's what makes it so hard to see how the mind can be physical. Because if the mind is just part of the physical... How could there be something that was just part of the physical world, like a clock or a blackboard or whatever, something that's just part of the physical world. But in order to know about it, you have to exercise your imagination. How could that be? How could there be something that was part of the physical world that had that characteristic? What we'll look at on Wednesday is a famous article by Thomas Nagel, where he pointed out, well, bats are really kind of weird creatures. Bats, have any of you guys ever encountered a bat at close quarters? If you live in the country, you might do this. They are very, very strange, right? It is not like having a dog. No one in their senses has a bat for a pet. I was once talking about this with a student. This was a very large guy. This was a rugby player who weighed maybe 200 pounds. He told me that he lived out in the country, and one night he woke up with a bat in his room, and he didn't think about it. He didn't hesitate. He just shot out of the room and down the corridor and into a cupboard where he shut the door and stood palpitating. This is like 3 a.m. And as he stood inside the cupboard, he kind of came to his senses and said, look, it's only a tiny little bat. What's that going to do to me? And so he opened the cupboard door a crack, and the bat had got out of his bedroom and was in the corridor and making long swoops up and down, and he shut the cupboard door again and just waited for the morning. They're really strange creatures. They have a skittering, strange kind of motion. You can't figure out what they're doing, or what they're up to, what they're after. Very hard to get the sense of what's going on with them. So the thing about bats is they're very intensively studied by animal scientists. Lots and lots is known about the way the brain works, about the way bat sonar works, about how bats do what they do. But can you get inside their heads? Can you form any imaginative understanding of what is going on with a bat? Well, no. I mean, there's no limit to what science can find out about the bat. But it is never going to tell you the first thing about what it's like in there. You are never going to be able to imagine the mental life of the bat. And that means that you don't know the first thing about the bat's subjective life. Now, with other people, it is good to think about extreme cases like the bat, because with other people, we take it for granted that you can kind of get the hang of what this person is up to. And that, the practical importance of that, having some empathetic or imaginative understanding of other people, that's very hard to exaggerate. Many people would say this is the most important single thing we have to do, is get some kind of imaginative understanding of other people. Here is Barack Obama, shortly before becoming president. It's important to see the world through the eyes of those who are different from us. The child who's hungry, the steel worker who's been laid off, the family who lost the entire life they built together when the storm came to town. When you think like this, when you choose to broaden your ambit of concern and empathize, get inside the head of the plight of others, whether they're close friends or distant strangers, it becomes harder not to act, harder not to help. The only way you know what to do with other people is that you have that imaginative understanding. The only reason you have any practical concerns at all in your life is that you have that imaginative understanding of other people. I mean, some people do dissent from this. Some distinguished people dissent from this. Here is Paul Bloom writing in the Boston Review, the current issue of the Boston Review. I used to believe this about the importance of empathy and imagination, but I am no longer sure. You'll note that's a very hedged remark, right? This is very controversial, right? What Bloom is saying is generally taken as an assault on common decency. How could that be right? Everything you care about in ordinary life, if it's more than just eating or staying alive yourself, has to do with your empathetic, your imaginative capacity to connect with other people. If you couldn't do that, you wouldn't know the first thing about them. Here's the psychiatrist, one of the founders of psychiatry, Karl Jaspers, talking about this contrast between having an imaginative understanding of someone else and being able to explain what they're doing scientifically. As someone said, you can have the algorithm. Science might be able to give you an algorithm. But look, suppose you have psychiatric patients. Suppose you consider people who are chronically depressed. Maybe they have major depression, or they're schizophrenic, or they're autistic. People who have some kind of psychiatric problem. There's such a thing as taking a scientific attitude to that person and saying, well, I can predict that what they're going to want is this, that what they're going to do is this. But that's usually felt to be inhumane. When you write off someone as crazy, the reason it's offensive to describe someone as crazy is that what you are doing is you are saying, don't even bother trying to get an imaginative understanding of that person. Don't even bother trying to get inside their head and see the world from their point of view. Jasper's point in this comment was that usually what you want to do is sink yourself into the psychic situation, understand genetically by empathy how one psychic event emerges from another. If you're watching a friend of yours going through a difficult time, making a difficult decision, that is exactly what you do. You try and get how one thing from the inside emerges from the other. On the other hand, you can distance yourself and just note by repeated experience a number of phenomena are regularly linked together, and on that basis explain causally. But that scientific attitude is a quite different one to the imaginative exercise. The trouble is, this kind of imaginative understanding of other people seems to be the only way we have of knowing about the things that matter for them or matter for us. That imaginative understanding of other people, we can't do without it. It's our only access to the things that are actually important. And if you only had a scientific understanding of the world, you wouldn't know anything about the mind at all. That was the point about the bat. You can have a complete scientific understanding of how bat sonar works, how the bat sends out the pulses, what the bat has to do to monitor the pulses, how bats avoid jamming each other. You can do such a lot of that stuff, but you still don't know anything about the mental life of the bat. So that's the basic problem. And that is not just a local problem to this class. I actually think if you think about our broader culture generally, that is the deep-running problem that is being addressed a lot of the time. I mean, that we are in the middle of a lot of the time. It's not being successfully addressed. There's just one last comment I want to make before we go to the GSIs and sections, which is people very often react to this kind of point. People very often react to this kind of point by saying, well,